A shocking truth about the person who saved old homes and made them national treasures is about to come out. Fans have been paying close attention for months, not sure if the face they've trusted for years is going to leave for good. Kevin O'Connor hasn't said anything as the rumors got stronger. He's finally ready to tell what really happened, though. And the story starts with something no one saw coming. People have been talking about Kevin O'Connor's plans for this old house for a long time. People asked him the same thing everywhere he went. Was he going away? Was the man who made the show feel like home leaving? No one was sure. Kevin never spoke up to give a clear answer. He then began to move in ways that made everyone talk even more. People began to notice that he was going to new places. He stood in front of large groups of people at big events and talked about building, leadership, and the lessons that can be learnt from old walls. It wasn't just for fun either. For these talks, he got paid between $15,000 and $50,000 per show. With that much money, he was in high demand outside of TV. He was also looking into other parts of the building world at the same time. He went to meetings with CEOs and contractors and gave them tips on how to make their businesses bigger or fix up old homes. People were starting to accept his voice on much bigger stages. When you thought about it all, Kevin was clearly starting something new. He was no longer just the host. He was becoming an expert, a leader, and maybe even a figurehead for the whole business. It's always been about change on the show. It fixes old and broken things and makes them new again. Kevin was right in the middle of all that change for 20 years. He helped make this old house new and ready for the next generation. He did more than just keep it going. It reached people on TV, online, and on job sites all over the world because of his work. But to really understand how he got here, you need to start with what not many people know about his life. The beginning was in a house that was always in need of work. Kevin O'Connor used to be a boy in Maplewood, New Jersey, before film crews followed him around. He was born in 1968 or 1969 into a family that knew how to start from scratch and make things. He lived with an engineer dad, and their house was always being fixed up. The boys in Kevin's family dragged planks and mixed cement while other kids played catch. He was able to read blueprints and measuring boards on his own by the time he was in grade school. Even though it wasn't always fun, it gave him something that he would always remember. Everything changed when I was 19. It happened over and over while he was training with the military. He had a heart murmur, which the doctors found. They did not promise that things would get better. Even stranger, the medical records about his tests and findings have been lost. They went somewhere no one knew where. He worried about losing those records for years, and since he could no longer join the service, he had to come up with a new plan. He went to school instead. From 1986 to 1987, he went to St. Benedict's Preparatory School in Newark and finished. There was a lot of work to do there. He used that skill to get into the College of the Holy Cross, where he studied history and graduated in 1990. History wasn't a way to get to a building show, but it did teach him how to make his points clear. He learned how to explain hard facts in a way that everyone could understand. After that, he went to Boston University and got his MBA. He felt confident going into the business world after all that schooling. The first job he had was with Fleet Bank, where he worked in sports management and helped pay for stadiums. After that, he went to work at Bank of America. He quickly rose through the ranks and was soon managing accounts worth millions of dollars. He made 6 figures, moved up the ladder, and built a life that most people would want. It looked great from the outside. Kevin could not ignore what was pulling him on the inside, though. He and his wife Kathleen bought a Queen Anne Victorian home in Beverly, Massachusetts in 2003. It looked really cute. Things went wrong right away after they moved in, though. Every inch had to be fixed. It was not safe in the kitchen, the toilets, the bedrooms, or anywhere else. The worst part was the background, though. So many layers and paints had been put on it. The walls felt like they were made of concrete. They scraped and tore for hours, but it didn't even make a scratch. They emailed the team at this old house as a last-ditch effort to get a tip that could help them stay sane. Kevin didn't know that this old house was getting a new show called Ask This Old House. He could not have picked a better time. They read the email. He wasn't just lucky to be in front of the cameras, though. Kevin was unique, a really honest way to question experts that got them to talk. He thought it was just a friendly visit when the crew showed up at his Victorian home. It wasn't clear to him that it was a test. They watched him work and asked him about the background issue that was making him crazy. His questions wouldn't stop, even when the cameras were off. During lunch, he followed Tom Silva around and kept telling him about his fears and thoughts. Tom had just started to eat when Kevin asked him another question. Everything was being watched by the producers. They saw that he wasn't just interested, he was normal. People watched him with wide eyes and felt the same way when they tried to fix up their own homes. When the movie was over, Kevin thought it was the best day of his life. He was so happy that he asked the group to take a picture with him. He wanted to remember them by giving them something special because he knew he would never see them again. But after only 3 weeks, he got a call that would change his whole life. The phone rang while he was at work at Bank of America. It wasn't a client, as he thought, but the people who make this old house. They asked him if he would be interested in hosting both the new show and the old one. Kevin was shocked. He believed it was a joke. He wasn't sure if this was real, even after he knew they were serious. To be safe, he told his boss at the bank that he might be back in a year. But the makers were smart, and they had a plan. They'd already been through 2 big and very different changes of hosts. The first host, Bob Vila, made the show popular, but he also did things that got him into trouble. Bob Vila began in 1979, a time when no one thought that home improvement shows could be good TV. He helped turn this old house into something that people all over the world saw. Even though the show got bigger, Bob's pay stayed the same. He used to only make $200 per show. He was only making $800 a show after 10 years. During his whole job, he made less than some contractors did in a single year. When Bob signed a big advertising deal with Rickle Home Centers, it caused problems with Home Depot, which was the show's main sponsor. He had to choose between them, according to PBS. Bob picked the cash. They fired him, and he didn't even hear it from them. A news story told his lawyer about it. Steve Thomas took over when Bob left. He was not the same. He was quieter and more careful. He stayed for 14 years. In 1998, he even got an Emmy, but he stopped being on the show in 2003. He only sent a short message saying that he wanted to sail and ski. There was no farewell scene or big end. Fans didn't understand. Everyone didn't know why he left. With all that background, the producers knew that the next choice had to be really great. Someone new and honest who could win over the old team and the viewers who always watch. That's why Kevin got the call. It wasn't a red carpet welcome, though, when they joined the show. Richard Trethewey, the show's straightforward plumber, met him with a shovel. Kevin had worked in bank boardrooms for years and was now digging holes for sewer lines. There were no cameras to make it look good. This was the real work, the kind that made your hands hurt. Kevin was the new host, but Richard didn't care. His goal was to find out if Kevin could handle the grime, the sweat, and the real work of the job. There was a test for every sore muscle, and Richard wasn't the only one testing him. Kevin was put right to work, sawing and measuring by Tom Silva. Kevin wasn't asked to act for the camera. He made him really do the work. Tom thought that a host should not only read lines, but also know what they're talking about. Kevin quickly learned that he had to work hard to fit in if he wanted to be accepted. He learnt the right way to use every tool for hours after shooting was over. He did it over and over again until he didn't have to think about it. People who watched him fight, fail, and try again liked him because of it. Nothing was expected to happen in the first year after he began. In 2004, Kevin was up for an Emmy for Outstanding Service as a show host. He was shocked. Even the critics were. There was a guy who had never worked in TV standing next to hosts who had been doing it for years. Years of hard work had helped Bob Vila and Steve Thomas become well known. Kevin did it all in one season. Was he honest? It struck a spark that they were interested and ready to learn, instead of being an expert. The Emmy nod showed that he was just what the show needed, but Kevin was also going through some other changes. He understood that he enjoyed talking about more than just building things. It made him happy. He couldn't wait to get the hammer, lay the bricks, and feel the work in his hands. With that attitude, he went from being just another TV star to being a real partner to the pros. He didn't stand off to the side. He stepped in. Kevin got a wrench when Richard showed him how to run pipes. Kevin helped nail the boards together while Tom showed him how to frame a window. This changed how the show felt. It was more than just teaching. Everyone was there to learn. He brought that attitude to Ask This Old House, where he also became the show. That wasn't enough for him, though. The stories in This Old House magazine were shaped in part by his work on the editing board. He also helped start a third show called Inside This Old House, the same year he became a host. There were behind-the-scenes looks at some of the best projects the show has ever worked on. The crazy thing was that he worked at Bank of America for a while. He didn't quit his job as a banker for good until he was sure that this new job would be stable. He was careful. He didn't want to be famous on TV. He wanted to make something that would last. Kevin was careful, but that didn't mean he was afraid to speak out. In fact, he did something one day that almost everyone thought was crazy. He was being interviewed, and the reporter asked him what he thought of all the new do-it-yourself shows on television. Kevin didn't hold back. He told most of them they were BS. They were useless to him, and they couldn't even hold his attention for a second. That one word, crap, got around. Setting a match on fire in a dry bush was like that. Fans were shocked, and some TV hosts were very angry. Kevin did not take it back. Instead, he stepped it up. He said those shows were not real. People thought you could fix up your whole house in one weekend on a tight budget because of them. Even though people were smart, they failed when they tried to do that at home because the shows were false. He said it was wrong to trick people. At that point, everyone saw that Kevin wasn't just reading lines. It was important to him to tell the truth and help people do the right thing. He said things that led to what he called a philosophy war. Quick, flashy shows that cared more about fun than real skills were on one side. This Old House was on the other side, and Kevin thought its main goal was to teach, not just entertain. There was more noise when HGTV stars fought back. They told Kevin that he didn't know their viewers and that people liked seeing quick makeovers, but Kevin wouldn't change his mind. It was likely not real if something seemed too easy, he said. It was funny how Kevin never brought up Bob Vila, even when everyone else did. Before Bob, This Old House had a host named Bob. Bob left in 1989 after a big fight over advertising. PBS told him to choose a side because he had deals worth $500,000 with other businesses. The deal was over when he picked the money. Kevin didn't say anything about it, though. He never talked about Bob Vila in public for more than 20 years. There is no praise or blame. Some people thought that was smart, because bringing it up again would only make things worse. He always chose his fights wisely. When it came to old builders, though, Kevin never kept quiet. He hated it when people made fun of the way homes were built 100 years ago. He said those builders knew what they were doing. They made do with what they had. They used coal and plaster to insulate as best they could when fiberglass insulation wasn't available. Kevin also didn't agree with people who said big homes were always bad. Size, he said, didn't mean waste. A big house that is well built might use less energy than a small house that isn't well built. That got him into fights, but he didn't care. He said it was lazy to judge without knowing. There was a reason for all of these strong views. Kevin didn't want this old house to change. It had to seem real to him. He didn't want it to become another quick-turn show. Part of that was also his failure to talk about Bob Villa. He wasn't going to bring the past of the show into the present. He instead thought about how to move forward. When Norm Abram left in 2022, that focus was put to the test again. Since the first show, Norm had been there. Everyone knew they could trust him as a steady, calm worker for 43 years. Kevin did not freak out when Norm left. It was like losing a piece of the show's heart. He carefully planned the change. He brought in new experts, but Norm's spirit never died. When Roger Cook had to step back because of his health, he did the same thing. Roger had worked on the show almost as long as Norm. Kevin slowly added Jen Nwada, so fans wouldn't think that everything changed all at once. Kevin also knew that the way people watch TV was quickly changing. People would film long scenes that went on for 10 or even 12 minutes without cutting them. Bob Vila was the speaker, but watchers today liked edits that were done faster. Kevin changed. He cut the pieces down and made them tighter, but they were never too shallow. He asked a lot of deep questions. The lessons were still clear, even though the scenes moved faster. He also helped the show go to more places. He began the podcast Clear Story in 2019 to talk about how things work in houses. The show was a big hit and is now in the top 1% of podcasts. He helped this old housemate set up Roku in 2021 so that everyone could watch every episode for free. There were 1,500 shows altogether, plus a station that streamed them all the time. He also helped start This Old Toolbox, a service that lets people rent tools to help them do the projects they saw on TV. Keeping the old spirit while accepting new ideas was how Kevin dealt with all of these changes, which helped the show last when others died. Plus, it helped him make good money for the future. A lot of people were interested in how much Kevin made. In the beginning, Bob Vila made around $200 per show. By the end, Kevin was making around $10,000 per episode. He had hosted more than 380 episodes, which means he made a lot of money just from that. He didn't end there. He made up to $50,000 a night when he spoke. A lot of people were moved by what he said at big trade shows and how he taught companies about the future of building. He also invested with the skills he had learned as a banker. He had stocks worth more than $5 million that brought in about $1.5 million a year. He still lived in the same Queen Anne Victorian house that made him famous on TV. The house wasn't a prize. Being careful, doing things the right way, and living in old houses were still important to him. Fans still ask the same question after all these years. Does Kevin O'Connor plan to move out of this old house? The answer is here. Kevin had no plans to leave the show because he was bored or tired. People began to say these things because they saw him giving more speeches, starting a show and putting money into it. Some people thought he was about to leave, but Kevin has said that he doesn't see those projects as replacements for the show, even though he's excited to try new things and gain more fame. They are additions. He said that this old house is still his home and that he loves to stand in old kitchens and wonder why the joists were done that way. Every episode still makes him happy because he learned something new. He still thinks there are more stories to be told on the show. It wasn't to get away from presenting that he took on more work. It was meant to show more people how important good building is. Kevin isn't giving up, even though he's busier than ever. He's just giving them more ways to learn and be inspired. He's made something so strong that he doesn't have to pick between work and TV. This is the reason Kevin O'Connor isn't leaving after 20 years. He is still there, in the sawdust, ready to ask the next thing. Kevin O'Connor has shown that you don't have to choose between being famous and telling the truth. You can live a life you love and still stand up for what the right thing to do is. One job at a time, his story isn't coming to an end. It's getting bigger.